That's a Jack special right there.
Santa Clara Depot, home of the South Bay Historical Railroad Society. This is the Crew Lounge, where knowledgeable people come to discuss railroading and model railroading topics. Pull up a chair, join us in the live chat, and let's get started.
And hello, welcome back. We're doing another show here today, the TSG Crew Lounge, TSG Live Crew Lounge, I should say. And today we're going to talk about overcoming obstacles. We have our panel here ready to go. So I'm going to hand it over to them as soon as I figure out on my computer how to do that.
Hi, my name is Rich Murphy. You've probably seen me in the NCE video showing my programming box and that sort of thing. The obstacles I'd like to talk about today are how you deal with fairly large storage underneath a layout and the kind of fixes you need to do for that. And also, as you get older, overcoming some of the obstacles, physical obstacles of a layout and how to deal with that. And Bernhard.
Hello, I'm Bernhard Beck. I'm modeling in HO for more time than I can remember. I really got back into the hobby 10 years ago. I'm a member at Silicon Valley Lines. You've maybe seen me in the TSG multimedia video there. One of the obstacles I want to talk about is what happens when things don't work the way you imagine them and what to do about that.
Hi, my name is Dave Connery. I model in HO, and I have a home layout, 17 by 10, 2 levels, models the Sierra and the V&T. I also have an FN3 layout in my backyard, and I have for a while been a part of a portable layout, an ON30 portable layout. So, I'd like to kind of concentrate on what on knowing yourself, knowing what you really want to do in the hobby, because a lot of times that's probably a hang-up for a lot of people, a problem.
Hi, I'm John Wiley. I've been in a couple of these things on the TSG channel. Today I think I'll talk about overcoming overwhelm and maybe how to break stuff down into bite-sized chunks, more manageable chunks. I'm a board member here at the South Bay Historical Railroad Society and hope to have a great discussion this afternoon.
So I guess someone should just start it off.
Well, let me get started. One of the things that I notice is that a lot of modelers, particularly relatively new modelers, get into the hobby and they think they've got to do it all. There's an awful lot of different aspects to our hobby, and most people concentrate ultimately on one or two. You can dabble in all areas. Some are pretty consuming. So, and by areas, I'm thinking that a lot of people, of course, belong to a club, and that's a way of satisfying your needs. Some people think they want to build a home layout. And that's a major project. Home layouts, probably, at least my experience, you probably put 12 to 15 years in. So you've got to, if you're going to do that, you've got to kind of look forward to that. But a lot of people are just maybe modelers. And so that means that maybe what they're going to do is build some models and then display them or maybe take them to their club. Other people tend to be operations mostly, and maybe all the time it takes to build a layout or even to build models is inconsequential, and they would rather just get right into the operation in the course club or an operating group. The operations SIG is a great opportunity to do that. But the point is thinking about how you want to do the hobby that satisfies you. You don't have to do everything. And you don't have to do everything now. You might become more of a rail fan at some point in your hobby life. But I think if the people who have really spent a bit of time thinking about what gives them pleasure in the hobby tend to be more successful and happy at it and stay at it.
I agree with Dave. I have been a member here quite a while now, and when I first joined, I wanted to do everything and learn everything. And I still enjoy learning new skills, but it's definitely become obvious that I'm not going to do everything or have time to learn it all. So there's been a couple of things that I've seemed to be better at than others. For instance, I seem to be doing better with lighting up structures and helping add things to the layout versus building something from scratch or laying track. So I agree that you find when you start you want to do it all, but it's okay to sort of find some areas you enjoy more than others and just focus on those.
I agree. I think Dave's point is an excellent one to begin this with. It's so easy when you get into model railroading to go, I want to do a home layout, and then it's, well, I want to learn something, so I'll go join a club. You meet people at the club, and then it's, why don't you come over to my place on Tuesday night? You end up with another one, why don't you come to my place on Thursday night? Then you go to a convention and you see Fremo, and I'm not, let's say somebody might have had this happen, and pretty soon you realize, I'm not even seeing my wife at all during the week. You do have to kind of realize you've only got so much time, and you have to prioritize, what really is important and fun.
So the point there is, though, you should really try out what you're doing.
True.
Since you're not going to know what you like until you try it out. So especially going to other layouts, talking to people, joining a club, see what you like. Do you like long trains, mainline stuff? Do you like building buildings? Do you like the electrical? Do you like the computer stuff? Whatever. There's so much variety in this hobby that you can do all those things, and to a degree you should try it out.
Yeah.
Since if you don't try it, you don't know if you like it, right?
Right.
Just like your mom said, try it, you might like it,
Yeah.
Usually that's vegetables, but
Yeah.
I can work in model railroading too.
Usually when I try stuff, I get it wrong on the first try.
Oh, definitely.
And I was working on a rock face for a module the other day, and there's a standard procedure: carve the rock, put on some light color, put on some wash, and make a darker wash, and there's your rock. It's beautiful. And I did that one evening, working in the living room. My wife is very understanding. And I looked at the rock, said, yes, this looks great. It has just the right tones, it has the right colors, shadow, yep, I like it. I went to bed, let it dry, looked at it the next morning, and the whole rock is green. Since the tint, the wash I was using had a greenish tint from the yellow and the white in there, and it looked terrible, terrible. So what do? You just try it again. Get the colors back, get the paint back out, paint the rock again, touch it up a little bit, see what you can do, get more variety, and afterwards, it looks even better than before.
I think what Bernhard is suggesting is what a lot of modelers face, and that is the fear of not being able to do it really well. Anybody that's been a modeler for a while knows that you wind up doing it over a lot of times. And some people have this concern that there'll be a nitpicker out there that will not appreciate the work that I've done, and I'm reluctant to expose myself to that kind of scrutiny. In fact, I think you'll find that most modelers are not critical about that at all, and are eager to, if they do anything, they're giving you hints on how to overcome some of the problems you're having. They're not there to tear you down. If you find a person that tends to be tearing you down, you probably just want to go in another direction. There's not that many of them. You just skip it. But it's not something to stop you from doing things.
Yeah, I've had some things where I've come back and went, oh, that wasn't as bad as I thought it was. And sometimes you can be your biggest terror downer.
Yeah, absolutely. Mm-hmm.
We do have a question from the audience. he says, the biggest obstacle is good track planning because we were in a hurry to lay track and run trains. So what do you guys do? I'm actually in the process of replanning my layout, and the first thing I did was I sent out my plan to a series of friends that I know won't be too critical, but will give me some honest feedback. And Bernhard here actually gave me some great ideas as well. And so it was like, oh, okay, I'm rethinking the whole thing, and I'll send it out to probably the same friends and a few more, because you need to expand it. You really want to collect all of that. Okay, you guys.
Well, one thing that I feel pretty strongly about is that if you base what you're doing on the prototype, you'll not make very many mistakes because they've already done all the thinking for you. You've got to be pretty creative if you're going to design a layout without any, just with a blank page and not based on a prototype. I really encourage others to, well, it doesn't matter, you don't have to model that prototype, but just keep that prototype in mind. How did they do it? Do it that same way, and you'll probably be successful.
I've seen a lot of videos on YouTube and done a lot of research that a lot of people now, even some of the more professional modelers, they'll have a plan and they'll lay it out, and once they lay it out, they realize parts of it don't work and they change it. And that's why a lot of people now, it seems, lay track with things like latex caulk, because you can get under there and move the track. It's not overly permanent. You can make changes and make adjustments. So even with layouts that seem to get planned out to the nth degree and printed out and the track gets laid down, and things get adjusted and moved around to make it smoother as they go. So it's getting over that fear of failure or not being perfect the first time, which is very much something I still wrestle with personally, but I have found, you know, it's like the saying goes, the journey is more fun often than the destination. It's often been a lot more fun sort of getting there and figuring it out than it has been having it finished. And actually, one of the things I found is getting into model railroading is I used to just try to buy everything, and I find I'm not so much a collector or even an operator so much as I enjoy tinkering with stuff. So I like to work on stuff. I like to figure out how to do it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. On track planning, what I found is that most of the track plans that I see don't really interest me because of the prototype or the specific situation, or they don't fit the space that I have. So the way I'm thinking about this is more in terms of layout design elements, where I think about what do I want, what elements do I want to have on my layout? Do I want a yard? Do I want to have long running? Do I want small towns? Do I want large towns? What space do I have? And then think about how much space do I want to lay out for those different elements, and then go looking for prototypes or situations that fit that space, at least to a degree. We never have enough space. It's another obstacle.
Well, that brings up a great point, Bernhard, is that space is probably all of our enemies. As you say, we never have enough space. But the truth is, if we had enough space, we'd never get it done, because we'd have such a big project, it would kill us.
Huge, yes.
And a lot of people say, well, I want to do all this, and I don't have a space to do that. Well, they're probably lucky that they don't have a space to do is what they dream of. And if they can then concentrate their dream down to fit in the space that they have, they'll actually succeed in completing it.
Short of being able to hire your own private army, yes, it's hard to get that mega layout actually completed in a reasonable amount of time.
Yeah, I actually, John points out something, and that is the moving the hobby shop into your train room because you can't stop buying everything. I think is really important, but Dave brings out an important point there about if you follow a prototype and you only buy what matches your prototype. Jack Burgess said this on one of the earlier programs. Yep. It gives you the discipline and hopefully some self-control. So there you go. You're in the middle of having a Southern Pacific themed layout, and they put out a new Penzi steamer that it's like, what are you thinking, man? So
it's shiny.
Yeah.
Well, and Jack's a good example. I mean, he is right down to a specific day and a specific month and year.
Right.
And the more you focus down at that finite, you can really eliminate a lot of unnecessary purchases because they don't fit.
Right. Exactly.
Another model I see that seems to be providing a good example of that is Brian Moore, right, in the UK, who's doing Guadalupe in the Southern Pacific.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I think he's was in the. I'm pretty sure it's Brian Moore, recent model railroad planning, but he found a prototype in an air in a year, and he has a little more flexibility than say Jack Burgess, but he's very much if there's no reasonable way I can say that it ran through here, I'm not going to buy it, right? Or we're not going to go get it or go beyond a certain time frame. So, and I think it was working great. I mean, all the photos I've seen of his layout and what he's doing are really good.
You have that not only for the rolling stock, but you also have it for the cars. You have it for the buildings that you put on there. If you're into prototypical line signaling, the kind of signs that you see, the kind of cars that are driving around, that's all set to specific areas. So the more you focus on that, the less you have to buy. It's really cool. You buy other stuff, but you're not buying the whole hobby stuff.
Well, and you probably use it more, because I may or may not have a collection of things that I bought and DCC'd and got great, and they've been in the box since then.
Yes.
One of the things that, of course, when people think about space, they overlook a lot of great spaces. If you maybe live in an apartment, just have an apartment, you've only got a few small spaces, but shelf layouts make a whole lot of sense. I know we live in California here, and so we don't have basements, and we don't really have usable attic space, so that winds up usually, for many of us, in the garage. And so I negotiated with the chief financial officer of the outfit that I could have my half of the garage. I built a room in my half of the garage, and I gave up. My car has never been in a garage, and it's got over 300,000 miles on it now. It's always been outside. But she has her half, and her car gets in the garage every day. So you got to make maybe some small compromises, but there is space in most every living quarters to have a layout. Or there's also clubs that have an opportunity for a lot of space.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So going along and off your thing, but getting back to the whole track planning thing, I see a lot of people that are beginning new layouts, and the first thing they do is go to the lumber store and buy a 4x8, and then they put legs on it. They start their circle of track. One of the biggest problems with that is you watch a train going around a track 10 times, you're kind of done. Mm-hmm. And you put a lot of effort into probably this project, scenic and everything else. The whole thing about a shelf layout is it gives you the opportunity to put in the switches and that, and actually play with the trains or role play with the trains, whatever you want to think of it as, which is really rewarding, I think.
You do a switching challenge. You maybe have a staging track coming off where the train comes in and comes off.
Yeah.
Bring in the cars, work the industries. There's a lot you can do in a shelf layout.
So as far as the obstacle being track planning, I think a lot of it too is just our preconceived notions of what a train set looks like versus what you get to do.
Mm-hmm. One of the best known modelers is a guy by the name of John Allen. He's been dead for, I think, 60 years now. But John started out with a little, I think, 4x8 piece of plywood with a layout on it. But he also put a couple extensions that just went to the edge. And then over time, he built a really large, beautiful layout. And that little layout was always a part of it because he worked off of that little layout. And that's something that if you think, wow, I got an elephant out here, how am I going to eat it? Well, you eat it one bite at a time. You start out with something small, but think that when you design it, put some opportunities for growth, because eventually you'll do that.
And this is the impetus behind model MRH, their whole TOMA, one module approach.
Right.
Their whole thing is you can have a larger plan, you break it down into small pieces, almost like layout design elements, but you build one module, one square, one rectangle to completion. So you can run trains on that, get everything done, you get the switches in, whatever you want to do. And it gives you that satisfaction, that sense of completion.
Yeah. As a follower of Bernhard on Facebook, though, he's basically done that. You've managed to escape out from your layout and run a line out to your garage. Go ahead.
Yeah, my layout that I started building in the garage 10 years ago is 8 by 9 feet. It's basically a quarter of a 2-car garage. More or less a spaghetti bowl. I added a lot of story to it so that it makes sense operationally. And it's good amount of it is scenic, and I felt like I don't have enough operational possibilities there. So I broke through the wall out into the garage and started adding modules to that. So basically started first with one more station, and added to that you go through the wall, you extend into the station. The station has more space, so it's more spacious than my original layout, and then ends in a dead track. And I figured, interesting. So now I have this extension with a station out of the layout room. If I had staging behind that, I could run trains from there into the layout in the opposite direction. So I have much more interesting operating patterns there. And have a longer or a larger story to that. So I built a staging yard for that, and the staging yard doesn't quite fit in the garage, so it needs to be angled. So I needed another module that connects the station to the staging yard, which actually turned out to be a lot of fun to build, since it is fairly big. It has scenery on it, but that was not planned this way, but whatever. You change the plans as it makes sense, as it fits fits the situation, and then you run with it. I'm now at a position where I'm looking at, now that I have these pieces there, I have a staging yard, I have a scenery module, and I have a station, I can take the whole thing and take it to a modular meet. And now I'm moving out into the wider world and try it out, see where that goes.
I think the idea that it's a journey, and that if you start in just one part, eventually you can store your golf clubs and tennis rackets and that, they'll get thrown out eventually, and you will use that space. But start out, and rather than do all bench work, then all track work, then all wiring, which maybe is most productive. But if you take an area and finish it as much as you can, and then move on to the next, you'll have a lot more variety to what you're doing, and you'll also develop all of your skills, not just one skill at a time.
So I think that's a great lead into our next question, which is, a big struggle is motivation. How do you deal with this? Do you attend shows, conferences, open houses, or club modeling events? For me, one of the biggest things I do to get motivation is, if I feel like I'm getting down a dead end on one thing, there's multiple aspects to the hobby. If you are getting tired putting down, scenic stuff, put a decoder in an engine or something along those lines. That's kind of how I deal with it. I also have another hobby, and I might switch to that for a couple of weeks and then come back a little bit more fresh. But yeah, Dave, you were basically saying that too. Boy, if you have to do all bench work or all wiring for a couple of weeks straight, it becomes a job to me.
Yeah, we're doing an addition on the N-scale layout here that I was helping out with, and I spent 6 months doing wiring and tortoises, and I haven't done anything since November on the N-scale layout because I spent 6 months doing wiring and tortoises, so I needed a break. So I'm doing some other stuff now. Putting some lights in some buildings on the HO layout and enjoying that. For motivation for me, I recently learned I would be, kind of on, I guess, in the same vein of buying everything at the hobby shop. I would buy parts, right? I think I'm going to do some lighting projects, so I might need to experiment with resistors. So I would buy 20 values of resistors and 20 of each of them, right? So I have just racks of parts now, and I've realized that in some ways it's become a detriment because I see all this stuff and it sometimes seems a little overwhelming. Like, where do I start, or what do I want to do, or what am I going to get to? So I've literally learned to break it down. And we have, there's 2 huge layouts here that basically have endless projects. There's always something to do when you have things of this size. And I've learned, if there's a whole area I think could use work, I'll just pick like one building or like one switch or one thing. And I'll only buy the parts for that now, and I will just work on that until I'm done with it. And usually that's a couple of days or, 2 weeks or something, and then it's easier to move on to the next thing and kind of keep going that way.
So for me, the working on the railroad is kind of a counterbalance to work. I work on a screen on a computer all day long, and when I come home in the evening, I just want to do something with my hands. So I do a little project in the evening, just 15 minutes, 30 minutes to kind of cool down from the day. After dinner, when the kids are in bed, when it's quiet, do a little bit of work just to relax. And having the hobby shop in the garage is awesome for that, because then you will find that one, I need a resistor, there it is. And you don't get bogged down. So when you have these small projects that you don't spend a whole lot of time on, but you just move it a little bit forward. And if you keep doing this regularly, without a lot of effort or a lot of commitment, or it doesn't feel like that, suddenly you have the building finished. Suddenly that locomotive has this new decoder in there, or that set of cars is revered because you've worked a little bit on it over a week or two, just a little bit here, a little bit there, and then a couple hours on the weekend or so.
One thing I know that motivates me is if I have a deadline, and there are two kinds of deadlines that I can think of. One is I often have my layout open for open house by the local NMRA group or O-scale groups or various different groups. And when I know that's coming up, then immediately that really motivates me to get out there and finish some projects. And of course, that's the time when everything that doesn't belong on the layout gets pulled off. And the second thing is I'm in a round robin group, and it's embarrassing if 6 weeks they come back in 6 weeks and nothing has happened on that layout in 6 weeks. So you're always, as soon as you realize, gee, they're going to be here in about 3 weeks, I better get going. I want to finish a couple projects here so that they know that I'm not just relying on them to build my railroad for me.
That's pretty cool. Yeah.
Yeah, no, for us here, it's our open houses. We have one in April and one in November, and so we have one in April coming up, so I have a couple things I got to get done by then.
Exactly.
Right. One of the other tricks I've found that kind of helps out is if you've got to lay plaster on your layout or something else, something that's going to take some time you have to do it in the morning before you go to work. Then when you go to work, you're still working on your model railroad. You're letting the plaster dry.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
I refer to it as stealing time.
Yeah, you let the glue set overnight, right? You
go.
put some parts in place, and then you walk away, and the next day, good to go.
Glue sets, paint dries. It's great for that. I was painting backgrounds yesterday and left them overnight in the garage and just cleaned them up this morning.
There you go.
So that works. Totally.
Do we have more questions, or should we just keep
No
rambling?
more questions yet.
Okay.
Do you want to start off with anything?
One of the things that I was faced with the prospect that an NMRA National Convention is being held here in San Jose, and my layout was going to be open, and so I had a lot of things I wanted to get done. So I built myself a little Gantt chart, and would regularly mark my progress. On I was going to have this station, the depot built, and I was going to have the track done in this area, and a whole series of things, and I know it sounds artificial, but that really kind of worked for me because I had it hanging right on the wall, and anybody came by could see whether I was making my progress or not.
And it's almost like we got the Karnak thing going here. Obstacle, overwhelmed. How do you decide your what-to-do list? And that's really kind of it. It's prioritizing, and it's making the list and all of that.
Making the list is like picking the things that you want to do. And then kind of picking something to start with.
Suckering your friends into the things you don't want to do.
Ooh, that's good too. Yes, I like that.
Well, one of the things you discover as you start to lay out that is that everything has to come first. And so you're whatever you're going to do, there's one thing I need to do before that. And then there's one thing I really need to do before that. And if I don't do this before that, that's going to be in my way.
Yeah,
but you got to just sit down and say, that's what I'm going to work on.
Yes.
And maybe make yourself do something that you don't want to do first.
It sounds like you guys are more organized at this than I've become, because
No.
lately for me it's just been, I just pick one of the things and you go with that, and I don't worry about the order or anything else, because eventually they all add up to where you're trying to go.
Exactly.
So some of them do have an order though. I mean, you cannot put the plaster down, or you cannot put the grass down before you put the plaster down. But
Well, you can, it just doesn't work as well.
it doesn't.
This is true. Some things, you do want to do before other things.
For infrastructure, electrical, turnouts, wiring, tortoises, all that jazz. Yeah, just pick one, whatever strikes your fancy today.
I would say pick the one that gets you to playing with trains or getting to the part you enjoy the most, the fastest. That way you feel like you're getting something out of it for your efforts.
Right. So one of the obstacles that I personally have had is I injured my back this last fall. And in thinking about restarting, I also tore out my layout just before injuring my back. And so one of the things is I want to get going on the new layout. But with my back, I can't handle some things anymore, or don't want to risk handling some things anymore. So I have somebody putting up sheetrock on my walls, so that we can get the backboard going and get some scenicking going on the behind the layout and that sort of thing. And the other day he was working on one wall, taping and mudding, and we still had 6 pieces of sheetrock left to come up the other wall. And I go, I know you need to do that, but could you just put the rest of the sheetrock up here? I need the motivation to continue with my planning. And he did it, and we both kind of sat back. We had a couple scotches, and we were like, yeah, this works. This is starting to look like a layout room again. So it's part of the list, and even if you have friends coming over to do things, prioritize the things that you think will get you going on to the next portion of your layout. So
Yeah, and run train as early as you can. If you keep running trains and you have that gratification that, I'm into operations, I really like operations, and just making up a train, delivering cars, even though there is no freight shed, you can still imagine there is one, and try out if the movements work. And if they work, great. If they don't work, change it.
yeah. So our next question I find interesting. Are there any creative solutions to the obstacle of money?
Of money? There are lots of creative solutions, and I was just thinking of one when Bernhard was talking about running trains without the freight shed. Google Images and Google Photo Search gets me a long way nowadays on doing things. You print out a picture of a freight shed and put on a piece of cardboard and stick it there. It sounds super cheesy, but it goes a long way to cementing what's happening, giving you that sense of disbelief, that role playing. Because it's not a finely detailed 3-dimensional structure, but hey, look, there's a building there that the boxcar goes to, and it's supposed to take boxcars. It really helps. And Google Images is free, and printer paper costs money, but not very much. You can steal it from work. I like that a lot. Also, there's people now that do these they're like cardstock buildings, right? It's like printed out on heavy paper, and I've seen some of those that I can't tell it's not like a plastic kit. It's amazing, some of those, and they're a fraction of the cost.
Absolutely.
I just did a kit from the company Roomettes, and it's basically it's building interiors, but it's a flat sheet of printed cardstock, and you cut it out and fold it in shape and put it inside, and it looks great with the light, and you stick a figure in there, and it's way better than I could do on my own, trying to print things out or paint little fake bookshelves.
Focus helps a lot. If you don't need to buy the things that you need to run your layout, you saved all that money. So depending on what you like, if you're modeling a rural branch line, you only need 2 or 3 locomotives at most, or less, a few freight cars, Aquarel has great kits, and run with that, start with that, and then slowly build up from there.
Another technique is to transfer your modeling costs to some other budget. The way you do that is volunteer to go to the drugstore, volunteer to go to the hardware store, and then you slip in the things that you need. Now, obviously you can't do that with locomotives, but for things like alcohol and all those other subsidiary things, you can put it in the food budget or in the household budget and get it off of your modeling budget.
We do have to give the disclaimer that Dave's not a licensed accountant or any other.
So one of the things I found recently, and normally my wife gives me a pretty free budget on buying things, but one of the things that bugged me so much was going to the hobby shop and buying a packet of 10 number 2-56 screws for $8, I think it is. I found a local hardware supply shop. I bought 500 of each size for like $7 per 500.
I started doing some brass repairs on HO, and I have found Amazon and eBay are wonderful for the tiny millimeter metric screws you need.
Yes.
You know, get 100 of them at a time for $3 or $4.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, there are things like that where you can blow a lot of money on something that's really kind of a more common hardware piece or whatever. Make sure you spend your hobby money on things that are unique to the hobby itself.
Yeah.
Well, and that's a great way to put it, because there's more hobby stores closed. You have to get more creative to find these things, and it's not as if model railroading invented 256 screws that are only 1/8 of an inch long, right? I mean,
Right.
we didn't come up with screws.
Yeah.
and there's a lot of other things like that too.
Well, one of the things that I do is, of course, I also buy my things like screws and that in large bulks. But then I try to make myself atone for it by at least go to the hobby shop and buy something from the hobby shop so that it still stays
Yes.
in business.
Yes.
I mean,
no,
I think that's
definitely,
important. Yeah.
definitely.
But spend your hobby budget on that. Where
Right.
Exactly.
You buy the things that you cannot get anywhere else.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. And support your local hobby shop.
There are no F units at Home Depot.
Yeah. Let's see, our next one is there a task or aspect of modeling you can't do or don't like to, and how do you get that task completed?
I am a terrible carpenter. I will measure it 4 times and it will not be straight. I do not know how I possess this skill, but I do. So I have found a friend that is a very good carpenter, and I do all his electrical, because he does not like doing wiring, and for whatever reason, I'm good at it. So I trade, for stuff like that, or painting, or whatever it is, find something that, where you can help them and they can help you. That's how I've addressed it.
Sometimes what I do is I set a present for myself. If I have a task I don't want to do, I say, okay, I am not going to build the structure that I'm really looking forward to building until I finish that task. As soon as I finish that task, then I'm free to go and do the model that I really want to build.
Don't get dessert till you eat your lima
That's
beans.
right. Yeah. You don't eat dessert first.
I don't know, life's pretty uncertain.
Okay, let's see here. This is good. Do you have any tips for managing a crew when building a layout? Yeah.
Well, my experience with a round robin group, and I've watched different members of the group, and one guy was he was a construction superintendent, and whenever we were at his house working, it was always effective because he planned the work. He thought about people's skills and he assigned them to do something that he knew they could do, and then he also had all the materials ready so that when you started on something, everything you needed was right there. He was, and I think that's kind of key is if you want to get good productivity out of your workers, you got to break down those barriers to make them keep them focused on getting things completed.
Yeah, I agree. I don't have a crew really working on my layout, but having been a manager in the past at various places, your biggest job as being a manager is being the grease between the gears. You are not a gear. And so when people come in, they need to find something. You need to be the guy that gets it there, or keep things organized, get them back into being organized so that things can happen. The other thing, of course, is having your list of things to do. John mentioned Seth Newman, who's been on numerous podcasts or YouTube videos of TSG, and every week he puts out a new task list for his crew, and it gets updated all the time, so they know exactly where they're at. It's pretty impressive.
Yeah.
I think being a benevolent dictator helps as well.
Yeah, that's true.
You do kind of have to sort of give people direction and, hope that, try to keep them in their lane, so to speak, I guess, I mean, you're not trying to limit what people do so much as let's focus on this area now.
Right. Okay, our next question. If I'm not good at something, what's a good way to find out info on it and to get help with it other than YouTube?
Books, practice.
Ask around.
Ask around.
If you have access to a club, go talk to people. You don't have to join. Just go talk to people.
Yes, clubs are really useful just to get you started in some direction. I found since I'm modeling Germany in the 70s, I cannot regularly go there. I go sometimes to Germany, and I definitely cannot go back to the 70s. So I don't know what things really looked like. So I look for books, for historical books, to get reference information. I find other books like the Lance Mintime books are fantastic. He has a great eye for laying out things. I really enjoy them. And look for tips there, how to do something. There are plenty of intro books from Kalmbach as well. And the thing that I found the most effective for my modeling is looking at photos, just looking at prototype photos and really tear into them, look at the details, look how things are arranged, where does the sun come from, what does the building look like, where is the weathering coming down the side of the wall, stuff like that. And when you start looking for those things, you start seeing them, and then when you actually move on to doing a building, it's more like, oh yeah, it's totally natural. There needs to be some rain here, a little bit of rust there, and the building looks fantastic afterwards.
The other thing is that, first of all, you say YouTube, but then of course you have to think of resources like Model Railroad Hobbyist, the online magazine. There are numerous blogs. Bernhard has a blog, and he posts things. There's links all over the internet to stuff like that. And then, of course, you find out, too, that a lot of your friends have interesting capabilities. My friend Dave Falkenberg, who's been on your videos, is heavily into doing stuff with microprocessors and that kind of stuff. And so I can go ask Dave for stuff like that. Matter of fact, Dave is the person that kind of led me into doing model railroading again. He works at Apple, where I do. And I'd seen him at SVL, and I said, what kind of DCC system do I need? And he gave me the answer. And I'm like, okay, great. I can ask you questions in the future, right? Yes. Another one of my friends, David Griffey, is a real electrician. He used to own a contracting company. So if I need to ask anything about that sort of thing, that's where I go. So, follow your friends. Ask them as well. Mm.
I know people have mixed feelings about Facebook, and I have mixed feelings about Facebook, but there's a lot of groups on there that I've gotten a lot of information as well, historical groups and other just modeling groups.
And inspiration.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. I also like to start small about things, make paper mock-ups, like we talked about earlier. It really makes a difference when you look at a scene with some paper mock-ups in place. Like, okay, this is kind of going the direction that I see in the photo, and if it doesn't look right with the paper mock-up, it's very easy to change and very quick and cheap to change too. And instead of having built this really cool kit that you're putting together and you spend hours and hours and hours on, and yeah, it doesn't quite look right. It doesn't fit.
So other things as well, the NMRA. Join the NMRA. They have a really good monthly magazine. They have a whole compendium of the standards of model railroading and stuff like that. Plus, it's a gateway to going to various conventions and that sort of stuff. Your local SIGs are kind of spawned off of that, as well as what do we call the Pacific, not PCR, but
The region?
Just the division, I guess
Oh,
it is.
okay.
There's division meets, there's regional meets, and there's a national meet. And all of these places have clinics, and they're great places to learn things.
And the books that Bernhard mentioned, the Kalmbach books, you probably lose about $20 when you buy one. But the first mistake you avoid, you've probably saved more than that. So that really makes, I think, a lot of sense. The other thing is if you're not in a club, because if you're in a club, you've got a lot of people to help you. If you're not in a club, if you can start or get into a round robin group, you'll find that there will be others that almost every round robin group that I've been in, there seems to be always somebody that knows the answer to just about every question that comes up.
Going back to the NMRA as well, they have a huge photo library. They're always growing. True. For looking at prototype photos.
Yeah.
And if you're really into prototype information, going to archives, looking at old maps is amazing.
And there's all the historical societies that provide both fellowship, but also a lot of great information. And some of them have huge, big libraries of material that you have access to by being in the
And
club.
some of them have huge rooms with all sorts of railroad memorabilia sitting around us, and I was like, why aren't we talking about this? This is an amazing place. This railroad club, South Bay?
South Bay Historical Railroad Society.
Thank you. I couldn't remember the name. Go to places like that. If you're in California, the State Railroad Museum, an
They have a
amazing
huge
place.
archive.
Yeah.
Library, really good.
So, okay, this is a really good question too. Fear of failure or not good enough ever stand in your way? Solutions?
It stood in my way all the time, and sometimes still does, I think. I guess I just keep trying. I just kept playing with things. I've learned it's not really important. At the end of the day, you're not doing it for anyone other than yourself, so, it doesn't matter. It almost, I don't know, I don't have a good answer for this. It's definitely something I've wrestled with, but it's also something I've worked through, just kept trying.
I think most people are their own worst critics, and their own. They are much more critical of what they do, and that actually once they do it and share it with others, other people will probably be much more impressed with it than you are. Obviously, when you make it, if there's any little glitch anywhere in it, you know where that glitch is, and you immediately your mind goes to that, but nobody else will probably ever even see it.
We have a gentleman here named Mike Lane that does a lot of our scenery work and has built a lot of scratch-built structures. And I remember asking him about a detail once, and he was like, "Oh, that hides where I messed up the glue here, and I got too much of this on there." And I was like, "Really? It looks great." And he's like, "Yeah, the key to this is just hiding the sins. It's not that anything he does is perfect. He's just kind of learned how to then we'll just we'll put that there, and nobody knows."
Yeah.
Scenery is really easy to fix.
I hear that. It can be green sometimes.
It can be green sometimes, and you can just put a little bush over this, or same with weathering. You just make it a little bit more dirty, and it's fine.
So, sometimes for me, it's a matter of remembering why you got in the hobby, what really made it fun for you. And for me, the kind of solution for this is run a train over the thing. Take a little bit of time, relax, enjoy it. And once you run that train around a little bit, you're kind of like, yeah, this is doing okay. It'll be better, but it's pretty darn good. Next question. What's a round robin group?
Well, that's a good question. Well, you take this little bird, you see, you run it around the track.
Everyone wears a red hat.
Joking, of course.
Yeah.
A round robin group is just a group of modelers that get together generally at a different member's house each week, one nighter. I'm in a group that we're all old timers now, and we've been together. The few of us that are left from the original group, we recruited other people our age, so we tend to do it in the afternoon now because we don't drive in the dark. But a round robin group is just a group of 6 to maybe 8 people that get together usually once a week at a different member's house, and they can either just sit around and talk and kibitz, but mostly they work on building models or building a layout.
Right.
And it's almost essential, I think. I shouldn't say that because there's some good examples, but it's pretty much important if you're going to do a home layout to develop a group of either a group to help you or a round robin.
Yeah, if you have a decent size home layout, it's very difficult to have that work and run well and make progress all by yourself. So having people come in every now and then to help you with tasks, especially tasks that need more people or where you have skill, where you need a skill that you don't have, someone on my group will likely have it.
And people might say, well, how do we get started? In our group, we were at an NMRA Coast Division meet, and we were just sitting there talking, and we said, well, why don't we get together? 4 of us got together. And inside of 2 months, there were 8, because other people wanted to join. And we've always, since that time, always had 8. Even people have moved, people have left the hobby, people have died, but there's always new people coming in, and we always 8 seems to be the maximum number because most people don't have space for more than that to work or play.
Right.
And we don't just build layouts, but we also have operating sessions. You know, if we get tired of working on something, when we'll run trains for a couple of weeks.
Yeah, you solve 2 problems with one go by that. Since when you have an operating layout, you need people to run that thing, and you can draw from this group that already knows your layout. They know how you're thinking about your approach. They built some of the things, so they know how it operates. It's a great resource to pull from, and it's easy to set up. Just find people that you can get along with, where you feel like you have a connection, and start meeting, go around, look at each other layout, and go from there.
I have a question. Let me put myself on here. I have a question. I also have my own answer to it, but you guys are the panel, so of course it'll be up to you to answer it. But and I'm sure someone in the chat must be asking this question or asking themselves this question, which is, how do you meet people to get into this round robin group in the first place? Or along the same lines, which is a question we've had before, which is, how do you get invited to an op session, for example? Now, I just gave one of the answers of how to get invited to the op session by being part of a round robin, but what are your guys' thoughts about that?
There are a lot of resources, and certainly one of them is the SIGs. If the SIGs are active, and in our area here we have a couple of very active SIGs, particularly the op SIG, but also the layout design SIG. So a SIG is a great way to meet people of a like mind. Go to a local NMRA meet. I think generally they'll let you come. I think the first 3 times as a guest, and then they say, well, you're not a guest anymore. Why don't you join? But that's a way. Or go down to the local club, if there's a club somewhere in town, and introduce yourself and say, gee, I'd just like to get to meet you guys because I'm thinking about maybe joining. And you'll meet a lot of other people that way.
Yeah, SIGs are special interest groups within an NMRA. They're groups for operations, for layout design. In the Bay Area, there's a very active community that puts up a meet every year at the end of January. That's how I got into knowing more people, and it's really nice to go to those meets, see friendly faces, and then when you go the second or the third time, you're like, oh, I've seen this guy before. We had a good conversation last time, and it grows from there.
Can I say something real quick? Yeah. Our last, as a matter of fact, they're talking about SIGs, and Bernhard just mentioned it's a special interest group. And as a matter of fact, the very last live stream like this that we did was live from the Layout Design and Operations Special Interest Group last month that was held at the at the California State Railroad Museum in Sacramento. So I think that's a great resource.
You can go online now. You know, it's real easy you can search for a local group or get on a forum or, so there's forums for local clubs, there's forums for larger groups. You can find people in your area. You can look up clubs around to go talk to people that way. You can also just start learning from people online, and take a picture with your smartphone and you send it up and you can get feedback on how to fix something or how to do something and go from there.
Okay, someone asks, if I have a space problem, no spare room, how can I overcome this obstacle?
Well, there are people that have built layouts in family rooms or other common rooms in the house. You might have to negotiate with other people in the house for that, but that's been an option. There's people that have done like a small shelf layout that can be put away when it's not in use. So it's not a permanent, doesn't take up permanent space in a room. This is going back, but people used to build them under beds, and you'd roll it under the bed or over the bed. You can get creative depending on where you could keep something in the house.
And think small.
Or apartment.
If you're in HO and you don't have room, perhaps you have room for an N scale, or maybe even a Z scale, or an N3. If you're really hungry to have a layout, you can find the space.
The other thing is, you don't necessarily have to do a layout. If you're familiar with the concept of a Fremo type setup, there are various modular setups. If you go to a train show, you'll often see an N-track setup. Fremo is a different standard that started off in Europe that's I find, a little bit more operational oriented. But there are these modular groups. If you go around, and you will find one or another at some event. And this is a way to set up your own little piece of a model railroad that is portable, because you've got to be able to bring it to the meet. And it's a great way to get into the various aspects of modeling.
It also allows you to meet more people. So the modules are designed to have a standardized end plate, so that any kind of module fits together with another module that's built to the same standards. And so your work becomes part of a larger layout. The catch, of course, is that you have to go somewhere for that, and usually this is in like fairs and model railroad shows. But it's a lot of fun, and meeting the people, running with the people that bring other modules for me is very enjoyable.
When I was in a portable layout where I had two 4-foot sections, I built a tray that would hold those two 4-foot sections, and then I hung it from my garage ceiling, but I hung it with cables that came to a little winch, and so that I could just winch winch the whole thing up above the cars, and then lower it down when I wanted to take those sections out, because I didn't have any room in the house that I could acquire.
And then you work on it and you set it up, and when you're done playing, pack it back, and
up she goes.
Yep.
In fact, it was a little handheld winch, and I just got a thing for my electric drill, and I just plugged the drill in and just motor it right up or motor it right down. Worked great. That still works great.
And a solution that I had that's rather different. My space problem was that I had a really large room, but everything on the bottom level of it had to do with operating winery. My solution was to begin everything at 48 inches above the floor, and everything was built up from there. Everything had to be dealt with having room for a pallet jack to move barrel stands that are fairly large in and out from underneath this layout and around the room. I needed to have huge aisle sizes because moving around all these barrels takes a lot of room. You can get creative and create space in areas that maybe aren't really standard. So
you can use a bookshelf. Yes. If you have a bookshelf, you can put a layout in that. Just go across. You can have a room like a guest room. It's not like a spare room that you put a whole layout in or a railroad in, but if you have a guest room with a bed or something, just put a shelf layout around the wall, a little bit higher than you normally would, and it's out of the way. You can have a couch underneath. You can sit under the layout, and if you dress it up reasonably well, it actually looks really nice. You just have to solve the dust problem. Since living spaces have a lot of dust, and the dust will settle on the layout, so some way to
box that up or put it behind glass or something would be really useful.
Yeah.
And totally another way of going about this, go in the backyard and build a garden layout. Also works.
Absolutely.
True.
And also, I've seen people build the layout above the doors, all the way around
Yeah.
the room, and have a lot of fun and do some scenicking up there. And
Yep.
and that's a space that's kind of wasted on just about every house.
True.
So one of the things that I've seen that kind of like is what Bernhard is talking about. Somebody had used IKEA shelving all the way around. I can't remember what the Ivar or Bjorn Nest or something like that, some Swedish thing, you know. And they just used these to make the shelves all the way around, and the top of the shelves is just a layout, as Bernhard says. It solved a couple issues. One, you don't have to be a great carpenter to use these things. You just have to figure out where all the parts go. Different hobby. But it solves the uniformity problem, and it makes the space totally usable.
I want to butt in for a second because I have a great idea, and I don't know if you guys are going to mention it. How about virtual railroads? Okay, because there are programs, and I can't remember that. I think one of them is Rails or something like that.
Train simulator,
Trains.
and
Yeah,
there's,
trains with a Z.
there's another one.
Right.
Yeah.
So you could actually build. Now you're not going to be getting your hands dirty and sculpting it and building stuff and adding your DCC and all that, but you can still build something that you can run.
Right.
But it's in your computer, and that takes up as much space
There's
as
a whole community online doing that. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thought it was worth mentioning.
And there's a community online recreating the 1-to-1 scale real railroad routes, in Microsoft Train Simulator, so you can run over them.
Yeah.
Like the Feather River Canyon and the whole California Zephyr route to Chicago. Like they've created the whole thing virtually.
Right.
What were you waving at us? You had a card that was getting waved, but I couldn't read it. Nope, nothing. Oh.
Yeah.
Ah, there we go.
Do you think of any other obstacles? Maybe there's some personal obstacles that you've had to overcome.
Spoken to both of mine.
Reachability.
Oh,
Yes,
yeah.
yes.
Oh,
so,
yeah.
So I mentioned earlier
police.
that my layout is in the garage. It's 8 by 9 feet. Now, when you do it 8 by 9 feet in HO, you are doing a few compromises, and one of the compromise I thought when I was planning this, not a big deal, is I have hidden ramps under the layout that go around the wall, and those hidden ramps are in the far corners of the room, under the rest of the layout. So when I was building this, not a big deal, because you can kind of stand in the layout and reach over there, it's okay. However, when the scenery was over the top of it, I'm no longer standing under the layout, I'm crouching under the layout to get into that corner, and it's absolutely horrifying.
Where does everything derail, Bernhard?
Everything derails in exactly where you think it would, in the farthest corner that is really hard to reach. It either derails there or there's a dead spot, because it's also very difficult to clean those corners. So when you're planning a layout, really think about reachability, both under the layout where there's hidden tracks or staging tracks, as well as on top of the layout. Same thing applies. If you're standing at the layout edge and you reach across, 3 feet is about the maximum that works. However, on my layout, I have corners that are 4.5 feet away from me. I really want to have a nice forest in that corner. I will never have it because I cannot reach there and work on it. It just doesn't work. So it stays the way it is because that's what it is. I mean, if I had built this a few years ago when the scenery was still open, I could have done it, but now, no way.
So on my old layout, I had a peninsula that was 7 feet wide. It was Caliente on the Tehachapi route. And so it's actually rational that it was 7 feet wide. It was also 7 feet wide because of wine barrels underneath. I needed a way to get to that far side, and I needed a way to get into the middle to start scenicking. I had a friend come over at one point, and he suggested that I simply leave the middle open so I can just stand there and do things, and it would have been a very non-satisfying caliente. So I went about, I got some of the 2-inch foam boards, and I laid that across. Making a floodplain is actually not hard scenicking work. In general, you want it to undulate a little bit, so a little bit of plaster is good, or some Sculpey. But then I needed to create an access hatch. And I found that by using this 2-inch foam, I actually used a couple of them, I then came in with a Sawzall, and I cut out a cone-shaped hole. It was cone-shaped so that I could let it rest in and it would seat itself. So that's one solution for being able to get at really hard to reach places. It really, I don't know why it wasn't obvious to me in the first place, but it actually worked out well. This go round, my solution is to not have anything any farther than 2 feet away. I'm getting old. I don't want to do that. I don't like crawling under things anymore. So that's the solution this go around. But replanning a layout is not maybe the most satisfying way to solve a problem. Sometimes you just want to get it done. So conable works.
I have a 2-level layout, and one of the problems I ran into, and what I came to the conclusion is, you have to build those on the bottom level, get your track work in electrical done, and then move up to the next level, get the track work in electrical done, and then do the scenic on the top, then do the scenic on the bottom.
Good point.
Otherwise, you get all that drip through that's going to destroy your lower level. So.
Sounds like you learned that from experience.
Altogether. I like that one.
There.
Definitely.
I have something else that I was going to mention. Sorry, I keep inserting myself into the panel here, which wasn't my intention at all.
We'll let you sit over here if you want.
Yeah.
I can't do all the computer stuff if I'm sitting over there. So, besides, I look better on this side of the camera. But one other thing is to try to get as broad of a base for your knowledge as possible, so that you know the correct questions to ask the people who might know. Does that make sense? So like, if I know, for example, Bernhard, that you know about a certain specific thing, if I don't know that you know that, I don't even have a place to start to where I can ask you the question, or, Dave, whatever the case. But if you know enough stuff to get that knowledge, and I think probably from online and books and stuff like that would be a great place to start. And even just having conversations with people. You can go to train shows. If you have a local hobby shop, you can go there and meet people there. I mean, there's all kinds of resources that you may not think of as resources, but they are. I don't know if that makes any sense, but.
And another thing you can do is volunteer to help somebody else. For one thing, of course, you kind of commit them then to helping you, but in the process, you'll learn on their layout, make the mistakes over there, and then come back to your own layout and do it right.
Ask questions. Ask plenty of questions. If something looks weird or if something doesn't make sense to you, just ask the people who own the layout or who run the layout. Say, why are you doing this? What is that turnout over there? I think on the HO layout here there is a spike turnout somewhere on the long run, and I was chatting with one of the folks that were running trains a while ago, and say, why is the turnout there? Well, it didn't froze, so we just pinned it, and it's still there. Like, oh, really? That's interesting, but sure, that works. The more questions you ask, the more you start building the space to know what questions to ask next, which is really useful.
Yeah. So, one of the things that's becoming obvious to me is one of the biggest obstacles in the hobby is trying to be a lone wolf.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That makes it hard.
Yeah.
If you have a problem relating to people, do some work on that for your hobby, and it might actually help you out a lot in other things. But getting to talk to other people, getting involved with other people is the way you actually can learn a lot more in this hobby.
How about the concept that one person can't know everything? I mean, you kind of touched on that already, but I think it's important to realize that.
Yeah. If you want a rounded out layout, I would think you'd want to have everything, but yeah, you might not be good at everything.
People that I've met that would call themselves lone wolf modelers as well, that's only applied to, they primarily work alone on their layout for whatever reason, but that doesn't mean they didn't reach out to people to learn things or go online and find information or get books. So, you know, they're still going out into the community at large one way or another to learn things and find information.
Yeah,
I think modelers, we tend to be introspective a lot. But just when you're just at any modeling event, you just start talking to people. I know I've met friends. We're sitting in a clinic, and we turned out we only lived 1.5 miles apart and became great friends for many years.
Exactly. I met a guy at our club, James. Yeah. Turns out he lives 2 miles from me. I live in Boulder Creek. There aren't a lot of people that I expect to be doing model railroading. And so, we're going to be getting together as I start my layout. And it'll be nice not being alone doing the layout. So.
It looks like there aren't really a lot more questions coming in. So you guys have some final thoughts or something, and then I'll do my wrap-up thing.
Just keep giving it a shot. If it doesn't come out the first time, put a different color on it, paint your mountain red instead of green, see what happens. Sometimes it works out.
And don't be afraid of what other people are going to think. We're really a lot of friendly people. We don't tend to try to hurt anybody.
Talking for a minute, 'cause I need to figure out.
My experience has been some of the people that are more critical have tended to be people that aren't actually doing anything on their own. The classic term is the armchair modeler.
Yeah.
They're reading a lot of books or a lot of internet posts, but they're not doing modeling or trains or anything.
Yeah. Getting the railroad all the way through, getting one track all the way through even, running the train over it, those are the things that get you moving and get you motivated and that sort of thing.
Just tape some leads on there and run that locomotive 3 feet if that's all you got. It makes a difference.
Exactly.
and it's so much fun. It's like, it's moving. It's going from here to here. And I feel really, really good about it. And then we just go beyond that. And the other thing for me is just practice. And if it doesn't work on the first try again, ask someone, figure out what went wrong, and try it again.
Someone didn't say something. I counted 3.
No,
We all did.
We all did.
You all did?
Yeah.
I guess I was too busy. We're good. Okay. Well, I guess that's it then.
We missed the 5th panelist there saying anything.
Yeah.
Oh, with me?
Yes.
Like I said, it wasn't my intention. There were some times though I think of stuff and I think it adds to the discussion.
Absolutely.
Sure.
So anyway, since there aren't any more questions coming from our live audience, I want to thank everybody for watching. Thank you guys for coming. Thank you, Ed, for being here.
Yay.
Everybody in the credits that are about to come on here in a second. And
Thank you, top secret producer.
Yeah, and top secret producers here.
Yes, yeah.
Off camera this way. And so join us next time. And I'm going to make a special plug real quick. And I know we're a month and a half or so away from this, but the open house here at the South Bay Historical Railroad Society is going to be the first weekend of April. Every year it is. And it's worth coming here because as someone was, I think, Rich, I think you were mentioning, there are hundreds of artifacts in the room that we're sitting. You can see some behind me. Crossbucks, signs, keys, locks, tools. There's even a velocipede behind the guys here sitting at the table. There's a lot to see here. There's a library, there's a tower. They got 2 operating layouts here. So it's definitely worth coming down to take a look at there's a car outside being restored that we're talking about possibly doing one of these live shows from sometime in the future. There's a lot to see here. So if you have a chance to come down to that, you're welcome to. And also, there are a lot of other model clubs in the area having open houses. I know Silicon Valley Lines is having an open house pretty soon. I thought I saw a post about that on Facebook.
Early June.
Yeah.
Okay, early June.
Yep.
See, so that's pretty soon. And there will be some links in the credits and also down in the description of this program. If they're not already there, they will be. And there's a train coming, so I'm going to go now. Thanks for watching.
All right.